Hello, and I'm delighted to be here talking to you today about why you need to grow your own API product management capability. My name is Claire Barrett. I'm a director at APIfirst and co-founder of the API Collective. We power the people behind APIs, mostly at large, mature organizations from globally recognized industries, where APIs underpin their business and technology strategies. I have more than 50,000 hours of consulting and being consulted to under my belt, and you can find out more about me at LinkedIn. The API product manager role is still emerging in many mature organizations. However, it's more and more in demand for realizing an organization's API strategies and ambitions. Its origins are in the technology sector, but we're seeing that it's a capability that's being sought after in all industries and almost regardless of organization size. So many of the emerging ex-tech scale-ups and startups and scale-ups are looking for this type of capability. If it's not already a role in your company, there's a strong likelihood that it will be in the future. So for hiring managers, for people in the role, people aspiring to be in the role, or managing teams in and around the space, all of them need to understand the role's expectations, how it's being positioned in the marketplace, what others are seeking, and how it can be set up for success. At APIfirst, we believe in the innate potential and capability of people. So an employee-centric view suggests that you're likely to already have the latent potential, the seedlings of future API product managers within your existing organization. So I'm going to talk about the work required that may need to be done to clear the weeds, give those seedlings water and sunlight, give them space to grow and thrive. I'm going to share some ideas of what the API product manager role can or could look like. I'll explain why we see the role as becoming increasingly important and prevalent. And I'll cover why we believe it's best to grow your own API product manager than to buy or rent it from from outside your organization. We get to talk to IT and business leaders on a regular basis and their HR counterparts. And many of the things they're telling us that they struggle with could be addressed with successful API product management capabilities and one or more API product managers. They ask us what the role is looking like. And we tend to suggest there's some nuance. There is a bit of an it depends in terms of priorities, depending on the API maturity of the organization. And one of the problems we do describe is it's still a very niche role. In a way, it makes it hard for people to be interested in applying for it or wanting to think about it. Arguably, it's not an easy one to describe to friends and family, often starting with what does API stand for. But a good way to understand where it's going or where it is at the moment is to look at how people are recruiting for it or advertising for it today. Here's an extract of a LinkedIn job ad that's live at the moment for a technical product manager role in financial services. It's not in New York, but it could as well be. And it's worth drawing your attention to some of the words that they're using. Words in the job description that would be very familiar as deliverables or outputs for architects, for project managers, for designers, engineering leads, arguably even change agents. But it's the words that support how the job is done that, to me, add this extra layer of subtlety as to where this role is going from, and one of the challenges with filling it, to be honest. If we look at not just the what, but how the work expects to be done, we can see words like shaping, planning, negotiating, inspiring. You could argue that these are the elements of an API product manager role, that the parts that would maybe be able to be supported, but certainly wouldn't be replaced by generative AI, the aspect of a role that would be hard to automate. Also, this list of deliverables and maturity was qualified as expecting to come from someone with more than 10 years experience, with a solution architecture background and financial services, solution architecture or enterprise application development, and deep knowledge of the financial services sector, all of which could suggest they're looking for a superhero or a purple unicorn. So perhaps it's worth understanding why this role sounds a bit like superhero, and to do so, we can have a look at its heritage. Here, I've lent on Martin Ericsson's History and Evolution of Product Management from 2015. I've mixed it in with my own observations, and this story goes back to 1931. At Procter & Gamble, there was an internal memo from Neil McElroy, and he talked about the need for pulling together a team of cross-functional, we'd call it these days, expertise, some people focused around a specific product that had interest and skills and understanding in marketing and sales and the manufacturing and build. From the end of the Second World War through to actually the early 1980s, the Hewlett-Packard way focused on product as representing the voice of the customer, so bringing the outside in to all things around product design and thinking. Meanwhile, in the manufacturing sectors, organizations like Toyota were leading the way with lean manufacturing practices, with ways of eliminating waste and reducing work in progress and inventory. That strong focus on quality. All of this merged through into the tech sector and the rise of technology industries at the start of this century. It's easy to forget how recent this focus on customer centricity brought into software allowed for the explosion in expertise around user experience, around customer managed platforms, technology spaces. And this big change in tech was also supported by the Agile Manifesto, the Jeff Bezos's mandate, the realization of platforms and ecosystems. So the technology industry has evolved a fairly clear understanding of what product means to them. However, it's arguably a little bit now blended in with the idea of product that has come out of industries from construction and mining, those sorts of structural engineering industries whose strength was in project and project delivery and planning, and sectors like financial services and other healthcare process-based industries, and even some government, where the focus was on process automation, large-scale, we'd call it monolith automation, and moving towards digitization. All of those are now coming together in the role of API product management, or how we might think of API products as being the opportunity often for organizations to unlock value from their existing data and collaborate with organizations in other sectors, in other industries, in new and creative ways. So I'd argue that the API product manager themselves needs to have some elements of all of this in their heritage, which would suggest a pretty strategic role for this superhero, this purple unicorn. Gartner suggested a term for the API product manager, a definition. That's 3 or 4 years old now. However, this does bring to life to me this importance of the API product manager as really realizing the strategic potential for play in ecosystems, and you could argue that that could even be internally in large organizations. Working out which API teams are consuming and what their needs are to be able to realize the kind of internal developer experience that speeds up IT change and reduces duplication and rework and complexity in the IT change lifecycle is also an important expectation for API product management. All of which are a good segue as to why the role is important. If your organization doesn't yet have one or more API product managers, it's likely that you may get asked or involved in creating a role or defining somebody and finding the right people to fulfill this type of capability. And you may have problems filling it from outside. One of the problems is that the expectations of the role might be unclear. Some people may think of it as a governance, internal, make sure that people conform to standards type of role. Some may confuse the product manager label with more of a delivery focused. So what we used to call what's been known as the art and craft of project management, planning and execution, and facilitating and organizing people around a fixed set of dates, of expectations and scope. Or it may be misunderstood as an adoption type of role. So if we go back to why it's important, the conversations that are going on in leadership teams about API product management include references to how they're being described in organizational plans and strategies. McKinsey called out that investing in empowered product managers was the second out of 6 key ingredients, non-negotiables, if you like, for digital success. Gartner has recently surveyed CIOs on the main inhibitors that they saw to realizing their API strategies, and number 1 was missing key skills, including the API product manager, and it was significantly higher than any of the others in terms of biggest barrier to success. An earlier study, smaller group of Canadian CIOs called out the API product manager role as the 4th most in-demand role that they saw in their technology teams, which the other 3 were related to cyber, UX, and cloud architecture. I'm sure AI has jumped up above those now, however one chooses to frame that. The key point, though, being of that particular study was that the highest performing organizations were the ones that saw API product management capability as the most needed and most in demand. So those organizations with vision have been talking about this for a while, and they are investing heavily in the capability. The API product manager becomes front and center for an organization's wider change impact. We could talk for a lot longer than now about why and how the API product manager helps realize an organization's bigger ambitions. But common themes that people at mature organizations are talking about in different ways are about how API product management enables them to partner and expand, whether that be through open banking, embedded insurance, embedded healthcare business models. It enables them to deliver IT change faster. The API enabled architecture being key to simplifying complex tech landscapes, overhauling, providing a means of componentizing the architecture, making it simpler and quicker to change and renovate, and also enabling them to more rapidly simplify and adopt new technologies, whether that be supporting their cloud enablement strategy, insourcing more, etc. And of course, supporting their AI abilities. The API product manager is finding those new business model opportunities. They're looking for the APIs to unlock value and potential out of existing systems and existing data, and allowing partners, customers, third parties, other teams to be able to use those APIs in new and creative ways to make it easier for customers to do business with the organization, helping people create and expand beyond traditional boundaries. They're helping break up monoliths into simpler, smaller Lego blocks, and they're strengthening their existing APIs. So if we go back to that job posting that I shared, we could sense from that the preamble for the courses, there was a real sense of urgency and importance to strategy for this role. They were looking for someone with at least 10 years experience, and as a reminder, someone with probably an application, enterprise application management or solution architecture type of background with strength in financial services. So let's picture what this person might actually be doing on a day-to-day basis. Imagine they're building a financial data product around an API product around asset finance. So they might have target markets in industries like aerospace or equipment leasing. And they're going to need to understand the systems and the people and ways of working of those industries in order to be able to understand how their systems could leverage the API capability. They're going to need to know the business languages of internally. They're going to need to understand processes and ways of working that might actually be quite different from the financial services asset finance team that they're used to working with. They may even be working with those industries at a different pace. They could arguably be working with different people from a different heritage, different generations. They might be customers that could be have been working in their industries for 30, 40 years, and they're leading a team of straight out of college Gen Z digital natives. So really going back to identifying this superhero, and there aren't many of them around. You might be able to find a wise owl who's got all of the EQ that you need to manage those different types of stakeholders, who's calm in a crisis and perceived as out of touch with, but could be perceived as being out of touch with reality. You might find someone who's great at delivery and action and getting tech solutions in place, but they may not be as comfortable with spending time brainstorming around a creative, trying things out, experimenting, and embracing attempts and celebrating failures, if you like, or learning. You could have someone who's great at crafting a roadmap and getting people and influencing buy-in to support it, but that same person might have chosen to take that kind of career route rather than getting knee-deep in delivery. So it's best to accept the inevitable, that there's likely to be gaps in the people that you find for the role and what you're looking for. So what are people doing? If you've got gaps, the key thing is to look at the gaps that are easier to fill and those that are harder. We'd argue that delivery capability, there are a lot of people who are really great at delivery, and there's a sort of a strong market for those people with a project and execution background. And that's the type of skill that you can scaffold or help or support someone who is perhaps stronger on the creativity, maybe that sort of architectural conceptualization side. We'd also argue that you can learn API technical know-how, but this is where perhaps it's where generative AI is going to help. You can get those skills, and that to an extent they can be learned. And you can also role model good collaboration practices, processes, and ways of working that encourage the kind of cross-functional thinking that you need to come up with really creative API solutions and products and ideas and get them executed. There are some skills, however, that are harder to fill. If you took each of these, I'd argue that commercial skills, which are should be at the heart of, or are at the heart of many API product expectations, those commercial skills are about running a business. And that's often a hard one to be able to give people experience of easily. The data and systems that underpin the API opportunities, having an understanding of those is really key for your current customers and the systems and data that their customers care about. Also, the API product manager does a lot of work around relationships and connections. That means working beyond and outside traditional organizational boundaries. And that's arguably a skill that is hard to teach. All of these things are the things that often reflect a company's culture and values. They're the kinds of things that are hard to replace. They're the kinds of things that your organization wants to hold on to with people. They're hard to find outside and to buy in and get quickly. So I'm going to just finish up with some key things on how to fill some of these gaps. This is about providing scaffolding to feel the things that you can focus on to support filling those gaps while people build that API product manager capability. Firstly, you can suggest casting a wider net. Look for adjacent pools of potential talent to perhaps the traditional ways in which some of these, what might be deemed technology or product roles, could come from. Are there digitally savvy colleagues in business teams? Are there technical writers, business analysts, UX designers, sales, commercial product people who could be scaffolded, supported with some of those easier to fill gap skills? It's probably worth being conscious that the type of internal talent you could be looking for might be also subject to some internal competition for other teams, and being able to create interest and momentum and value behind the role and explaining its importance will be a way of attracting and finding the best talent, rather than perhaps somebody being interested in taking on what might sound like a bigger or more promotable type of task and activity. Second scaffolding element is to invest in the right training and education. It needs to be practical, it needs to be in the moment. The smart teams at this are giving people time to self-train, contribute to communities, finding peers in other industries that are doing similar roles. We often find that people are too busy to take 2 or 3 days off to do intensive training, or even logistically may be difficult for remote or hybrid teams. What we're finding is that people get value from workshop bootcamp type training that can be blended in with their role and give them plenty of opportunities to think and apply what they're doing. Training needs to replicate the environment, and you can provide skills with people in their role, and save the offsite time for the real creativity that you want to get from coming up with, for example, API products and ideas. Because the role is a lot about collaboration, coordinating, getting people together, showing how this can be done is a great way of role modeling the types of behaviors that most large organizations are seeking to get for innovation and so on anyway. So the API product manager role can be a great spearhead and pointer to get going. So lastly, make sure that the expectations for success in the role meet with the organization's wider objectives and management needs and expectations. We do see that the things people are learning and maybe not so successful, the things to avoid are setting API product targets too tightly as kind of nicely cascaded OKRs, because sometimes they can compete with other goals. They have to be actually evolutionary. They have to evolve with the role and the expectation and the maturity of an organization's API capabilities. It tends to involve managing tension with project type, traditional project measures. But as more organizations are moving to a product mindset, that opportunity becomes easier and more straightforward. Things like early measures of API numbers can lead to API sprawl. Getting the pace at which people are migrating or putting APIs onto API management platforms may potentially compromise quality. As with everything, while what gets measured gets done, it's also important to recognize that a measure may be creating some equal and opposite, or create some tension elsewhere. And so watching how the measures are the right measures and allowing them to evolve is really important. So let's sum up today. The API product manager role is important to organizations to realizing their business and technology strategies. The role's getting bigger and it's getting more relevant, and it's competitive to try and fill it in the open market. We believe that having it in-house is the differentiator. So get started. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch and keep the conversation going, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can find me here on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.